only anti-money, but it's actually anti-carbon or an anti-life unit. So every unit of this currency means it's actually going to have, a carbon footprint. It's going to have effects are going to be ethereal. In other words, you're going to buy and sell carbon credits. It has nothing to do with stopping pollution, supporting infrastructure, or building jobs, or even making the world a better place to live, or even ecosystems to survive. It's based on total control, austerity fascism, and the reduction of the world population.
Now, one of the things that I did hear, and especially since you brought up the Israel and Iran conflict and problems that are going on over there, was that, and I think the Webbot said this, Griff, if I remember right, that there would be a false flag type of situation where Israel would go ahead and go through with this kind of as an agent of the United States. But I don't know. I mean,
I don't think it'll get completely out of hand, because they want to have a peace treaty and they want to bring us to the brink. It's almost like waterboarding the world. They want us to be in terror because there's going to be radiation clouds circulating the planet if they have a limited exchange between India and Pakistan, or they hit the Bashar reactor. And there's 62.5 tons of uranium-235. If they vaporize the core, we won't have a meltdown like Chernobyl. This will be hundreds of times more radiation circulating the northern hemisphere. Direct attack on your mitochondria, immune system dysfunction, and guess what happens when your immune system just starts to not work and your natural killer cells are inactivated and your mitochondria die? You get plagues. You get worldwide plagues even if you haven't released one. Everyone's immune system is no longer functional. So I expect that they will release the new upgraded version of H1N1, which I received the documents in March 16, 1997, in Zurich, Switzerland, given to me by doctors that smuggled it out of the World Health Organization. They're getting ready, probably in this winter 2010-11, or shortly thereafter, a new upgraded version of H1N1 that's much more lethal. They'll be saying, oh, see, it's good, that's over. H1N1. It's not over. Not only that, we have more lethal versions of Lyme disease, mycobacteria, and fungi that are spreading around the planet, and a weakened population are going to start getting sick and dying.
Well, this is, it seems like one problem seems to cascade on another.
That's right. It's going to be like that biblical thing that says, you escape the snake and you try to get in the door, and, a bear breaks in the door and you run out the back and the lion gets you.
Yeah, that's not...
Yeah, that's what's happening, and people are right now. That's why you see the markets climbing up. They see low interest rates, but people are not buying homes now. It's like, well, what's next? People have this innate kind of animalistic, kind of intuitive knowledge, even if they were so imbued with watching TV and sitcoms. They're starting to wake up and realize like something really terrible is coming. Probably even before Halloween. I think by the third week in October, we're looking at an economic meltdown. And it won't be the final thing. It'll just waterboard us to scare the hell out of the population, maybe a 30% correction in the value of the dollar. And then they'll intervene, which they can always do, because the only thing that will stop them is when they run out of zeros. And they'll get more regulatory control, and they'll get more control of the population, especially if they have more terrorism, like they have these super high alerts in the United Kingdom and Mumbai, India, and here in America. They want another false flag. And they want another excuse because they've already got the drone attacks pretty well halfway across Pakistan now. So they're already prosecuting the next war. And they're heading toward Waziristan, with quote, the loose nukes are on their way to one of your cities in America, Atlanta, Chicago, whatever. And I know the long and the short list. And they want to have a nuke go off and blame it on the Pakistanis in one or more U.S. cities. They'll say it's Al-Qaeda, which means the little toilet, or the database, whichever way you interpret the Islamic script.
Wow. So in other words, then, if they do that, and we know that the Pakistanis really don't have the technology or delivery system to do it through the air, and
they'll come in a container. Listen, if you want to bring in a container, less than 2% of the seals are broken on any container coming into America. Most of the container shipments now coming through the southeastern United States are coming through Freeport, Bahamas. And guess who manages most of that container shipment that comes in? It is the People's Republic of China. and they are free of having U.S. Coast Guard or other things breaking seals and walking around with radiation detectors in all 4 points of these containers, so they can have not just a suitcase nuke, but a good-sized sucker that can take out a quarter of a city or 30 or 40 city blocks of Los Angeles, Chicago, or New York. Not just the World Trade Center towers, which the only, and I mean this, the only way, and I'll debate anybody on this, that they vaporized those buildings was a combination of cutter charges with superthermate, and the primary detonation was micronuclear devices in a chain of pearls that vaporized the core of the building, period. And I know this from classified sources that the Israeli Mossad nuclear agents did it under direction of the CIA.
Now, you know what's interesting there, Doc, and you struck a chord with me because I'm very, very vocal about the 9/11 truth and everything like that. And all I can tell you is that they would have had to. A plane just does not knock out the core columns to the point where it implodes on itself.
No, not only that. If you take a acetylene torch, or you even take a magnesium bar, because I've done this in chemistry lab and in fume hood.
Sure.
If you hold it against there, you might burn through if you hold it for 20 minutes. The only way to turn 2/3 of a massive building, a quarter mile high, with millions of tons of material, concrete and steel, into a dust, and a third of it into an atomic vapor, is a thermonuclear explosion, period. No directed energy weapon, period. No advanced explosives, RDX, thermate, a high explosive core can do it. Only a thermonuclear device designed to actually cause implosion, because even pancaking, if you cut the external joists of the building, and there was no core at all, which they tried to say at first, which is total hogwash, would have taken 94 seconds on computer simulation to fall to the bottom. The debris pile was a fraction of what it should have been, because most of the building just blew away. It wasn't even there. And the people weren't found because they're paramagnetic. Concrete containing water is paramagnetic. Paper is not. Therefore, paper is blown all over the streets, and it didn't go on fire. And you say, well, how could that be? How can paper be blown, but people are turned instantly at 50,000 to 100,000 degrees, instantly to dust you shall return. And concrete became an atomic vapor, not chunks. Rebar is thrown across the building 600 meters away, and there's tiny fragments of bone on the tops of buildings a quarter mile away. And paramagnetic surges cause mirror on fire trucks and cars to explode, and aluminum plenum chambers and air conditioners melt down, and step-down transformers on cell phones become inoperative and melt down. And engine blocks get so hot and aluminized material around tires melts the tires. It's caused by an EMP. This was a nuclear explosion.
So you can have nuclear explosions in a microburst scenario or something like that, where you have a low yield.
You can have 200s of a kiloton and a chain of pearls that can vaporize the core, and 150 feet out. All it's going to do is blow up the rebar and the other things in a direction. It'll fall on its own footprint. And the immediate area, it'll vaporize the core, and you have a chain of pearls running up the center of the building. And the core, within a few hundred thousandths of a second, is turned into an atomic vapor.
So let me ask you this, Doc, out of curiosity, because the architects and engineers say they found evidence of nanothermite in the wreckage.
There was, and nanothermite was used. If you see how the building was constructed, I talked to PhD architects and engineers, and they've told me that the building was designed to stand a 9.5 earthquake. In fact, the only building that would be left standing in North America if there was a 9.5 earthquake in the northeast United States was the Twin Towers. Every other building, house, and everything would fall. Those buildings were designed to have a central core that was literally like massive. Columns are like 4 to 6 feet across and covered with 1.5 to 2 inches of asbestos, large asbestos fibers. So if you took an acetylene torch or even a rocket engine against the side of it, all it would do is turn it red. Thermate, superthermate wire, any of these things, we calculated out the amount of superthermate wire which you can make, and there's a place in Israel that makes it. If you put it in the building, you'd need 2.14 million miles of superthermate wire. You can't paint it on, and how are you going to get inside the building and all these things and uniformly do that? You're going to cut the joists, because you can get inside the walls, because that's the access areas, and you can put superthermate in a way so it can cut them, But that's it. It's just a cutter. It's not going to vaporize giant girders and turn it into an atomic vapor. It's not going to take a girder and bend it around like a horseshoe. It's not.
Right. It's a cutter charge. Right.
Yeah. I have advanced training in analytic and inorganic chemistry and metallurgy, and I can tell you, it's impossible. And if you look at the number of terajoules of energy required in a fraction of a second to turn those buildings into a dust and atomic vapor, the only thing that can do that and release that amount of energy is a thermonuclear device or a chain of small devices specifically designed to make it fall in its footprint.
So one question I had from the chat room this evening is, then how much, first of all, with a device that small,
size of a large softball.
Okay, so an EMP, how strong of an EMP would that
EMP
emit?
was strong enough to knock out cell phone repeaters for up to about 1.25 miles around the buildings. That's well known by the firefighters. EMP was strong enough to actually burn up air conditioning units on adjacent buildings that didn't receive even the actual blast of the building, which would have blown in windows. So the EMP was strong enough to destroy communications and to do other EMP-like effects like aluminized mirrors to make them explode, and engine blocks.
Wow,
you can even see the pictures.
Yeah, no, that's interesting. I'm extremely.
You only need a spike of energy of so many what called gigatesla of magnetic pulse energy for 100,000th of a second, and you could have these quote paramagnetic effects.
That's incredible, folks. If you guys have a question for Dr. Deagle, number is 646-727-3387. We'll take your call and your question. So, Doc, I mean, knowing that this technology exists and everything else, and knowing the direction that they're going, I've also heard in the news recently a lot of stuff dealing with this extraterrestrial factor. And I want to bring this up because I've heard you talk about things like this before, and a lot of people are...
How far down the rabbit trail are your people ready to go?
No, they're believe me, they're ready to go. And
okay, well... I was a doctor for U.S. Base Command and Strategic Defense Command, and also a doctor for the U.S. Air Force Academy and a civil aviation examiner for all international airliners for years. And so I took care of pilots that were straight-laced pilots, all the way back to pilots that flew the British Air Force jets, and I've interviewed them back as long ago as the mid-1970s when I was practicing. So I can tell you that 95%, this is to summarize, of the vehicles up there are ours now. It was a less percentage in the past. And 5% are not ours. How's that?
Really?
5% are not ours. 95% of the vehicles you see up there that are misused, like the TR-3B giant triangles and the Aurora Space Fleet and other types of vehicles are ours. 5% are not ours. And these vehicles are from, if you want to call it, I call them transdimensionals would be a better term rather than talking about extraterrestrials, because they're so far more advanced technologically than what we are currently. Remember, mankind fell from a great war that occurred thousands of years ago.
Right.
If you know anything about the what's called the Black Knight satellites in geocentric orbit of 22,000 miles inside the Van Allen radiation belt in polar orbit, it's estimated that it's been up there at least 12 to 14,000 years.
Yes, I've heard about that.
And that's one of the very first things they briefed me at U.S. Space Command was all the details about the Black Knight satellite and lots of other things, including our mining operations and city on the moon and our colony on Mars. And the fact that we control every cubic centimeter of space between here and Mars, and we have advanced space-based weapons platforms, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So in other words, Buck Rogers in the 25th century is not in the 25th century, it's in the 21st century. And we have a diversion, if you want to call it a bifurcation of our civilization, where the solutions technically to pollution and energy and every other technical problem we have has already been found or transferred to us from other advanced civilizations, both good and extremely evil. And we're at the crux of a galactic and cosmic and spiritual war where we are the battleground of a very large galactic battle between good and evil.
Okay, well.
It's well beyond anything that people can imagine, like Battlestar Galactica or anything else. It's far more intense than that.
Griff, I'm curious to know how you're taking this newfound information as far as now. I always had an idea, and I know